Imagine being forced to surrender your life, your body and your heart to a man who doesn't know what love is. A cold, ruthless general who sees everything as a matter of power and control. But what if, amidst this forced marriage, something unexpected happens? What if the woman who seemed trapped in a prison becomes the only one capable of melting the ice around this man's heart? And what if the man who never knew love discovers that he might be falling in love? This is not just a story of pain and captivity. It's the tale of a silent battle between desire and fear, power and vulnerability, control and surrender. You'll witness every step of this emotional struggle, every challenging glance, every kiss that's more than just a kiss, every secret threatening to explode. Can love truly bloom where everything seemed doomed to die? Or will this forbidden passion end up destroying everything? Stay with me until the end to uncover a conclusion that will leave you breathless. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video so you don't miss any chapter of this intense journey. And comment below. Where are you listening to this story from? I want to know who's experiencing this emotion with me. The contract was signed. The cold, lifeless letters on the paper felt sharper than any knife, and yet what truly hurt Olivia Carter was the silence of the man sitting across from her, her father. Once strong, now defeated, his eyes cast downward, shoulders slumped as if he were carrying not just debts, but guilt far too heavy to bear. "It's for our family, sweetheart," was all James Carter could manage to say. At just 20 years old, Olivia found herself trapped in a decision that was never hers to make. Born in a small Texas town, she had grown up surrounded by poetry books and simple dreams, with a heart that still believed in love. But now she had become a bargaining chip, a name at the bottom of a debt list, a solution to a problem. That wasn't hers. The man she had been promised to carried a name that inspired both fear and respect. General Liam Blackwood. A ruthless military strategist with steel-gray eyes and a flawless reputation. A man who, they said, had won wars without ever blinking, and who now demanded a wife as part of payment for an unpayable debt. No one knew exactly why. Why would a man like him accept a complete stranger in exchange for numbers on a piece of paper? But Olivia would soon realize that Liam wasn't driven by emotion. He was driven by control, order, power. And now she was part of that power. The wedding was arranged quickly. Just 2 weeks after the contract was signed, Olivia found herself surrounded by seamstresses, pinning a dress that didn't feel like hers, more like a costume for a role she never auditioned for. Every stitch, every layer of lace felt like a web tightening around her. Her mother wasn't there to guide her. Her best friend had been kept away by distance and fear. And her father, he couldn't even meet her eyes. She was alone. Alone and walking toward an altar that felt more like a courtroom. On the wedding day, the sky was clear. Unfairly beautiful, Olivia thought. The kind of day when birds should sing and bells should ring for a fairy tale, not the start of a sentence. She was taken to the ceremony in a silent black car that felt more like a hearse. Outside the church, journalists pressed against the gates, desperate for any glimpse of the event uniting a nameless girl to the most feared general in the country. It was a private ceremony, but nothing escaped public curiosity. As the gates opened and the music began, Olivia's legs trembled. The aisle felt endless. Each step echoed, revealing her fear. And there, waiting at the end, was him, Liam Blackwood, tall, impeccable, a living statue of control. He didn't smile, he didn't blink. He simply watched her, as if he already knew everything about her, as if he were analyzing her before even touching her. When she reached him, Olivia had to fight the urge to step back. He held out his hand, cold, firm, a gesture that sealed not a bond of love, but of possession. The officiant's words passed in a blur. She barely heard them. Her mind was too focused on trying to breathe. When the kiss was permitted, Liam leaned in and brushed her lips, like signing a document. No tenderness, no desire, just dominance. A chill ran down her spine, and it had nothing to do with romance. In that moment, she knew this wasn't the beginning of a marriage. It was the start of a game of power, and she had no intention of playing the submissive piece. But could she really stand her ground after all? Who was Liam Blackwood behind closed doors when the cameras were gone? The black car drove her away from the church in silence. But in Olivia's mind, a storm was already gathering. Something told her this man wasn't just cold. There was something broken inside him, something dark, something she might have been meant to face. The sound of the bells felt distant, muffled, as if the world around had been submerged in thick glass. Olivia's hands were damp beneath the veil, and her heart. It beat, as if trying to escape the reality she was walking into. Each step on the white carpet grew heavier, not because of the dress, but because of what it represented. The end of a freedom she barely had time to enjoy. The altar seemed far away, yet each inch forward brought her closer to the man who would be her husband, not by choice but by obligation. And there he was, still, standing like a statue carved from black marble. Liam Blackwood's eyes weren't searching for love. They were seeking control, like a general surveying new territory. Before laying down the rules, Olivia shivered. The church, despite being filled with white flowers and colorful stained glass, felt cold, almost unwelcoming, a stage set for a soulless performance. When her eyes met his, something inside her froze. There was no tenderness, not even curiosity, just a sharp, focused gaze, clinical almost, as if he were studying her entirely. Her fears, her hesitations, her weak spots. She swallowed hard, keeping her chin lifted. If that man thought he could intimidate her with silence and military posture, he was mistaken. She might not have had a choice at that altar, but she could still decide how she would face the days ahead. And she wouldn't do it on her knees. The officiant led the ceremony with a steady, almost detached voice, like he was finalizing a business deal. And in many ways, that's exactly what it was. A contract between two families, an agreement between debt and power. When it was time for the "I do," Liam answered without a moment's hesitation. His voice rang out, sharp and firm. "I do." Then all eyes turned to her. Olivia hesitated, just for a second that felt like an eternity. Then, with her soul screaming inside and her heart torn between anger and surrender, she whispered, "I do." The officiant smiled briefly. "You may now kiss the bride." That's when Liam stepped forward. No rush, no hesitation. He looked at her, and his fingers brushed lightly against her chin, as if testing the strength of fine porcelain. Then, he leaned in and sealed the kiss. There was no tenderness, no emotion, just the feeling that she had been branded like cattle. His touch was cold, detached. A seal, not a sign of affection. When he pulled back, Liam held her gaze a second longer than necessary, as if to make sure she understood the message. She belonged to him now, and in that moment, Olivia realized something crucial. He wasn't expecting love. He didn't want partnership. To him, this was a strategic alliance, and any feeling would be, at best, irrelevant. At worst, a threat. The guests applauded, but it sounded hollow, like clapping after a tragic play. The music played. Petals floated in the air, and Olivia smiled out of duty. Every step she took beside Liam, heading toward the church doors, felt like a step deeper into a maze she wasn't sure she'd be able to escape alone. Inside the limousine, silence took over. Liam didn't hold her hand, didn't look at her. Just stared out the window, as if the world outside were more interesting than the woman he'd just married. It was Olivia who broke the silence. "Have you always been like this, or is this just your warm-up?" He didn't react at first, then slowly turned his head, his expression unreadable. "I'm just being who I am, Mrs. Blackwood. You'd better get used to it." She gave a half smile, a smile made for battle. "We'll see." He didn't respond, but for a brief second his jaw seemed to tighten, as if her challenge had cracked something small in that wall of ice. She took note of it, saved it like secret ammunition. The silent war between them had just begun, and Olivia, and she was ready to challenge the general. The silent war between them had begun, but Olivia had no idea the battlefield would have doors so tall, hallways so cold, and walls so thick. As the car passed through the iron gates of the Blackwood estate, she felt something tighten in her chest, a mix of awe and oppression. The property looked like it had been pulled straight from a historical drama, grand and untouched, as if it held onto secrets time had forgotten to take away. The driver didn't say a word as he opened the door. Liam stepped out first. He didn't offer his hand, didn't wait. He simply walked toward the entrance like a soldier returning to base, not a man coming home. Olivia stepped out on her own, clutching her dress tightly to avoid tripping over her own doubts. The mansion was stunning, marble floors, antique stained glass, tapestries that looked centuries old, but nothing felt alive. Everything was too perfect, too neat, too quiet, as if even the furniture knew that affection had no place here. Liam removed his jacket with precise movements and handed it to an employee who appeared without her noticing where from. Then he turned to her, eyes as dark as the night outside. "You're free to walk around the house. There's a wing reserved for you on the second floor." His voice was dry, almost businesslike. "But understand one thing, Olivia. You belong to me now, and everything in this house does too." She didn't answer right away. She just walked toward the staircase, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble, trying to seem more confident than she felt. She stopped on the first step and looked over her shoulder. "A prison with a garden is still a prison, General." Raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're sharper than you look." She climbed, step by step, as if accepting the challenge. Her room was beautiful, huge, with a balcony overlooking a dark forest. On the bed was a box with a note. "For you." Inside, a light, comfortable dress and satin slippers. But Olivia wasn't fooled. Even the most delicate gifts couldn't soften the feeling of being watched. Surrounded. She took a long, hot shower, hoping the water would wash away the sense of possession Liam had imprinted on her with just one look. But even wrapped in a soft towel, she felt exposed, in a world where every door seemed locked even when open. Drawn by both the architecture and her restlessness, she left the room and followed the hallways down to the library. The creak of the wood beneath her feet was the only living sound in the whole house. She opened one of the doors and found Liam. He was standing by the unlit fireplace. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. It was the first time she saw him without the weight of his uniform, and yet he still looked armed. "Having trouble sleeping?" he asked without turning around. "I'm having trouble figuring out exactly what I am to you." She crossed her arms, heart racing. "A wife, a trophy, a paid-off debt." He turned, slowly, as if each movement was carefully calculated not to break his own ice. "You're Olivia Carter. That's enough." He looked her in the eye. "And you should understand that here I don't need chains. The world does a fine job of keeping people tied to their roles." Olivia stepped closer, eyes fixed on his. "And what's your role?" "Liam?" Silence fell, heavy. He didn't answer. He simply walked toward the window and pulled back the curtains, revealing a garden lit by old-fashioned lampposts. "You're free to walk, but watch where you step." His voice was barely above a whisper. A chill ran down her spine. Not from fear, from awareness. Something in that sentence didn't sound like a threat, it sounded like a confession. "And what if I decide to run?" Liam turned slowly. His eyes were darker than before, as if a battlefield still burned within them. "You won't run, not yet," he paused, "because somehow I know you still want to understand who I really am." She bit her lip, annoyed. She hated that he was right. "Maybe I just want to beat you at your own game." He gave a half smile, the first since they met. "Then play. But play well, Olivia. I'm not a man who bends easily." "Good? I never liked easy." She turned to leave, but as she crossed the doorway she could still feel his gaze on her back, as if every step she took was being watched, recorded, anticipated. But in that moment, Olivia also started seeing him differently. Maybe behind that wall of ice, there was something more, something even he didn't dare touch. The Blackwood mansion had many rooms but only one master, and while Olivia was free to wander its endless halls, it was impossible not to feel that everything in that house was designed to remind her who was in charge. The heavy curtains, the doors that creaked like they were whispering secrets, the portraits of generals lining the walls. Every detail was a quiet reminder that this was Liam's territory. And she, no matter how much she resisted, was just a guest under constant surveillance. In the first few days, Olivia tested the limits. She walked through the gardens alone, sat at the dining table without waiting for him, asked the staff about exit routes, and each small rebellion was met with the same answer: silence. But not just any silence, a silence that screamed, as if Liam were in every corner, even when he wasn't there. Her first attempt to escape wasn't dramatic. There was no running, no car waiting at the gate. It was quiet. She put on a coat, tucked a bit of cash into a small purse, and walked to the far end of the garden, where an old greenhouse opened into a hidden trail. She could already smell the damp leaves, feel the night breeze on her face, taste hope on her lips. Then a light came on. She froze. From the shadows he appeared. "Going out for a walk?" Liam's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Olivia turned slowly, heart pounding. "I'm trying to breathe. Is that a problem?" He didn't move closer. He stood there under the half-light, like a predator calmly watching over his territory. "So freedom is an illusion. And yours, Olivia, is even more fragile than you think." She clenched her fists. "So what now? You're going to keep me here like a prisoner?" "You're keeping yourself here," he replied, infuriatingly calm. "Don't call them chains when they're just difficult choices." She stepped forward, defiant. "This isn't a choice. It's blackmail wrapped in silk. Do you really think you could just walk down that trail and disappear?" He gave a half-smile. "The world out there is harsher than I'll ever be. And what does that make you? A hero for keeping me here?" "No." His answer was dry. "But I'm the man trying to stop you from destroying yourself out of stubbornness." What she saw in his eyes then wasn't anger. It was exhaustion, a deep weariness, as if he'd fought too many inner battles and lost more than he cared to admit. Olivia went back inside, not because she agreed with him, but because something in his voice made her pause. Maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it was instinct. The next morning she woke with a strange feeling of being watched, and she was. One of the staff, an older man named Alfred with a soft voice, was waiting in the hallway. "The general asked that you feel free to choose any books you'd like. The library is at your disposal," he said without looking her in the eye. Was it a gesture of kindness, or just another form of control? Either way, she went. She sat before the massive bookshelf and immersed herself in heavy volumes on war, politics and psychology, and there, between dry pages and cold words, she began piecing together a puzzle. Liam. Why would a man like him, used to commanding troops, conquering land, earning respect with a glance, choose to settle a debt with a marriage? His control didn't come from shouting, it came from silence, from anticipation, from the way he always seemed to know what she was thinking before she said a word. That's what frightened her, and strangely, fascinated. Her too, she started pushing his boundaries, small provocations, laughing too loudly at dinner, asking about his childhood, his past, his scars, touching on things he clearly avoided. And for a while he just observed, like a wolf waiting to see what she would do next. Until one night, in the foyer, he finally broke the silence. "You think I'm watching you, Olivia?" He walked toward her slowly. "But maybe you're trying to understand me more than you're willing to admit." She didn't deny it. "Maybe." "Then tell me, what do you see?" She took a deep breath. A man who hides behind the uniform because he's afraid of what he feels when he's unarmed. For a second, his gaze faltered. Not much, but just enough for her to know. She had hit the mark. And for the first time, Olivia felt that in this invisible war, she was winning battles too. But the question that remained was, how far was she willing to go to break through the armor of a man who wasn't even sure he wanted to be saved? There was a silent war happening inside the Blackwood mansion, but this time it wasn't about orders or punishment. It was subtle, made of glances that lingered too long, silences thick with intent, and words that seemed innocent but carried the taste of challenge. Olivia had decided she wouldn't be the submissive lady Liam expected her to be. If he wanted a wife shaped by silence, what he'd find instead was a shattered mirror, full of sharp edges. No matter how tightly he tried to keep control, she would find where it hurt. Because every man, no matter how cold, has a weak spot. And Olivia intended to find his. She started with the details. A red dress a little too tight for dinner, a compliment about a book she knew he hated, a teasing question about why he never smiled, and why he seemed to hide even from himself. Liam, in turn, played in the field he knew best: control, predictability. He was precise in every move. He knew exactly when to arrive, when to leave. His posture was that of a man who never gave an inch, but his eyes, his eyes, they were starting to slip, and that's where Olivia aimed. One afternoon she stepped into the garden in a summer dress far too light for the chilly breeze. She sat on a stone bench, crossed her legs slowly, almost theatrically, and opened a book. A romance novel, the kind filled with scandal and surrender. She knew Liam was watching from the office window. She could feel it. The air, always, shifted when he was near. Moments later he appeared, hands in his pockets, his expression too controlled to be casual. "It's cold for that dress," he said, stopping beside her without sitting down. She looked up slowly, a smile on her lips. "I thought generals didn't bother with things as trivial as temperature. Generals notice everything." His tone was neutral, but she caught it. Something in his gaze was changing, something refusing to stay strictly under control. "Then you must have noticed your eyes get darker when you're irritated." She closed the book and stood. "Or curious." Liam watched her but didn't move. "You're testing limits." "I'm testing you, Liam." He was silent for a moment. Then he stepped closer, shortening the space between them until she could feel the heat coming off his body. His eyes locked on hers. "Careful, Olivia, people who play with fire sometimes get burned." She tilted her head, just enough so their lips nearly touched. "And sometimes fire surrenders." Then she walked away, without looking back, leaving him there, pride slightly cracked. That night Liam took longer to arrive at the dining room. When he did, Olivia was already seated, wineglass in hand, laughing with Alfred, the butler. A real light laugh that felt completely out of place in such a rigid house, and maybe that's exactly why it unsettled him. "You know, Alfred," she said, not realizing Liam had entered, "sometimes I think even the walls in this house miss a little chaos." "Some walls were built to keep from collapsing, Mum," the butler replied gently. That's when Liam spoke. "But too many walls can turn into prisons," he said softly, but loud enough to be heard. She turned toward him, and their eyes met, two sparks on opposite sides of the same battlefield. During dinner, utensils were used with military precision. Words were chosen like chess moves. Liam studied her. Olivia smiled. The tension between them thickened like smoke before a fire. When dessert was served, she cut into her slice of apple pie, and before taking a bite said, "You must have plenty of enemies, Liam, but I don't want to be one of them. I just want to see who you are when no one's watching." He set his fork down on the edge of his plate. "And why does that matter?" She met his gaze. "Because maybe I'm the only person in this house who isn't afraid of you." Silence. He stood. She thought he would leave, but instead he walked over to her, stopped at her side, leaned in slowly until his lips were near her ear. "You should be." His voice was low, warm, and charged with something she couldn't quite name. And then he walked out. But Olivia felt it. Behind that veiled threat, there was something else. A crack, a spark, maybe even desire. And for the first time she wondered, just how far was she willing to go in the very game she started? The mansion was filled with the sound of the storm. Outside, thunder tore through the sky with violent force, as if echoing something beginning to collapse inside that house of stone. And inside, Liam Blackwood himself. The wind howled through the hallways, like ancient voices whispering truths he had tried to silence for years. Olivia wasn't asleep. She never slept on nights like this. Nature's turmoil always seemed to stir the restlessness in her chest, and tonight it burned stronger than ever. She wore only a light robe and walked barefoot through the main corridor, her fingers brushing against the cold walls, as if sensing something about to crumble at any moment. The power flickered and the mansion went dark. When the emergency lights came on, soft and golden, she followed an impulse she couldn't explain, straight to the library. And there he was, Liam, sitting in a brown leather armchair, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes lost in the flames of the fireplace, as if searching for an answer in the fire to something burning silently inside him. Olivia stood in the doorway. "Hoping to burn your demons in the fire?" Her voice was soft, almost teasing. He didn't turn. He just answered, eyes still fixed on the flames. "Some demons don't burn. They learn to dance with the fire." She stepped in slowly, approaching him. "And you, do you dance with them every night?" Liam took a sip of whiskey before setting the glass down. Then he finally looked up at her. There was something different in his gaze, less steel, more doubt, less command, more fatigue. "What do you want, Olivia?" "To see if there's still a man left in there, or just the general." She stood in front of him. "Because I've already figured out the soldier sees me as conquered land. But the man, does he still feel anything?" Liam didn't answer, but his clenched jaw gave him away. The silence between them was too heavy to be casual. "You think you know me," he murmured, "but you don't know anything about what I carry." "Then show me." Olivia knelt in front of him, looking up with eyes that shone, bold and vulnerable all at once. "Show me who you are when no one's telling you to be strong." And that's when something broke, not with words, but with the movement that followed. Liam pulled her close, firmly but not roughly, like someone holding something they've longed for but are afraid to break. His lips met hers with an intensity that didn't come from desire alone, but from emotional urgency. It was the first real kiss. A kiss that wasn't about deals or dominance. It was a confession. Olivia kissed him back, fully, fiercely. With everything she had kept bottled up since the altar. His fingers slid into her hair, her hand rested on his chest, feeling the heartbeat pounding, as if the man who'd been frozen for so long was finally alive inside. They broke apart for a moment, foreheads touching, eyes closed. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered, voice raw. "But it did," she replied, "and you're not in control anymore, Liam." He opened his eyes, intense, shadowed, but now human. "You throw me off balance. I am your balance now." For a moment he looked ready to pull away again, as if the feeling growing inside him was more dangerous than any war he'd ever faced. But Olivia pulled him back and kissed him again, with the certainty of someone who knew that even if he resisted, he was already hers. When she finally stepped back and walked slowly toward the door, he didn't stop her. He just sat there, breathing unevenly, lips still parted, like a man who had just discovered what it meant to feel and had no idea what to do with it. And outside, the storm raged on. But for the first time, it was Liam who trembled within. The next morning, the sun rose as if nothing had happened, as if the walls of the Blackwood mansion were still standing strong and everything remained under control. But they weren't. And it wasn't. Because for the first time in years, Liam woke up without his armor, and that absence and that void where only discipline once lived felt uncomfortable. He opened his eyes before sunrise, as he always did, but took longer to get out of bed. He could still taste Olivia's kiss, still hear her whisper that he was no longer in control. And the worst part, he knew she was right. It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a slip. It was a break in the wall. In the library, the book he'd been reading for 3 weeks was still lying, open on the same page. But now the words felt out of place, as if he no longer knew how to read the world through the same lens. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed lighter. There was a different glow in her movements, like someone carrying a quiet truth in their chest, a certainty that she had touched something rare, something dangerous but real. They didn't talk about the kiss, not directly, but every gesture now carried meaning. When their eyes met at breakfast, there was hesitation. When their hands brushed in the library, there was a jolt. When they Past each other in the hallway, their steps slowed as if time was asking for more time, and Liam began to watch her. Not like before, not with the eyes of command, but with the eyes of someone trying to understand. He watched how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how her fingers traced the edges of pages before turning, how her voice changed when she spoke about the past, and without realizing it, he started wanting to know more, about everything, about her. One evening, he found her standing on the balcony, gazing at the sky. The moonlight touched her face, and there was something untouchable about the scene. He stood there quietly, just watching. "You know what scares me the most, Liam?" she asked without turning. He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "What?" "That I might be starting to like it here." She turned, slowly, to face him. "And that it has nothing to do with the mansion." He didn't answer right away, but something shifted in his expression. Subtle, almost invisible, but there it was, a wordless confession that he felt it too. "I don't know what to do with that," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Then don't do anything for now. Just sit with it. Feel it." Olivia moved closer, closing the distance. "You've spent your whole life trying to control everything. Maybe it's time to just live." He lowered his eyes, as if allowing himself a moment of weakness. "Do you think you can change?" "Me, Olivia?" She smiled, not arrogantly but gently. "Calm, sure." "I don't want to change you, Liam. I just want to know the man behind the general." And that's how the change began, not with declarations, not with promises, but with presence, with shared silences, with late-night conversations, with unexpected laughter over dinner, with her laugh echoing through the house as if, finally, it was home. He started reaching for her books more than his whiskey. He began sleeping a little longer, listening more and commanding less. The staff noticed, but no one dared to speak of it. It was as if everyone understood something sacred was unfolding, something too fragile to be disturbed. But inside Liam, the war wasn't over. The part of him beginning to love was still battling the part that never learned how to feel, and that inner war was quiet, but devastating. Until one day Olivia found him in the garden beside the bench where she often sat to read. He was staring off into the distance, his expression heavy. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He looked at her, and in that moment Olivia knew that wall was about to fall. But was she ready to see what was hidden behind it? The Blackwood mansion had grown quieter over the past few days, but it was a different kind of silence now, no longer the silence of fear, but of anticipation. Something was shifting. Liam had become more present, though still reserved, and Olivia moved with a quiet smile, as if she knew a secret even he hadn't fully discovered yet. But the calm wouldn't last. A formal invitation arrived that morning, a political gala hosted by high-ranking military allies. Liam was expected to attend, and now that he was a married man, everyone anticipated seeing Mrs. Blackwood by his side. Olivia held the envelope delicately, her eyes gleaming. Being introduced to that world meant far more than just wearing an expensive dress. It was, in a way, a test, a stage. Liam hesitated before telling her. Her presence, while unavoidable, was also risky. She was everything that world distrusted, spontaneous, emotional, free. And yet, that might have been exactly why he couldn't stop her. On the night of the event, the limousine slid through the rainy streets of Washington. Olivia was breathtaking in a deep blue gown that hugged her curves with elegance and mystery. Her hair was pinned into a graceful updo, exposing the delicate curve of her neck, which Liam glanced at more than once without realizing. When she entered the grand hall at his side, all eyes turned instantly, some with curiosity, others with judgment. But Olivia didn't flinch. She walked tall, eyes steady, as if she knew exactly who she was and exactly who she was walking beside. "Everyone's watching us," she whispered, leaning in slightly. "They always watch," Liam replied, though his eyes weren't on the room. They were on her. "But today, I understand why." Throughout the evening, Liam was drawn into political conversations, formal speeches and strategic meetings. Olivia remained by his side, poised and charming. But there was one thing he couldn't control. She drew too much attention, and when young Captain Noah Walker approached, the cracks began to show. "Mrs. Blackwood," the captain said with a polite smile, "it's an honor to finally meet you. Liam doesn't say much, but your name has been floating through the halls like a beautiful mystery." Olivia smiled politely. "And now the mystery's solved?" "Only partially. I'm still collecting clues." Noah extended his hand and, with a boldness masked as courtesy, lightly touched her arm. The gesture was subtle, but enough to trigger something in Liam. Something he didn't even know existed, Olivia noticed. Of course she did. And for just a second, she let Noah think he had a bit of power in the game. She offered a longer smile, a softer laugh, and Liam watched, silent. But his clenched jaw and narrowed eyes betrayed his restraint. When they moved away, he simply said, "Be careful with the captain." "Why?" Olivia asked with playful innocence. "He seems kind, smart, has a good sense of humor." "Because I said so." That was all Liam replied before turning to another diplomat. But it didn't end there. In the limo, silence settled again. But now it was different, dense, charged, electric. Olivia leaned her head back, glancing at him sideways. "You were upset?" "No." His eyes stayed on the window. "Jealous?" This time he looked at her, not with rage, but with a tension that felt ready to snap. The captain is a boy who doesn't understand the rules. "And you—" He paused, breathing deeply. "You're playing with loaded weapons, Olivia." She moved closer, her voice low, barely a whisper. "What if I want to provoke you? Then you're succeeding." The car stopped, but neither of them moved. The driver didn't dare interrupt. "Do you want me, Liam?" she asked, direct, unguarded. He hesitated. The words didn't come, because the desire was clear. But what held him back wasn't fear of her. It was fear of himself. "You want me, but you're afraid you'll lose yourself, aren't you?" He didn't respond, but in the darkness of the limo, Olivia saw it. In his eyes, for the first time, a silent plea for help, as if he were saying, "Don't leave me alone inside myself." And in that moment, she understood. Behind that wall, there was a man wrestling with feelings he didn't know how to carry, and maybe, just maybe, she had been sent to set him free. That night, Olivia finally understood. Liam Blackwood wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of himself, afraid of what he might feel if he let his guard down, and that made him more vulnerable than any visible scar. After the event, after the silence in the limousine, they entered the mansion like two strangers who knew too much about each other. Olivia went straight to her room, but she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the echo of Liam's gaze burning in her thoughts. It was past midnight when he knocked on the door. No formalities, no excuses. She opened it. "Can I come in?" His voice was softer than usual, without armor, almost human. "You're already here, aren't you?" He stepped inside and stood in the middle of the room, as if unsure where to begin. Olivia waited. She knew sometimes silence said more than 1,000 words. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of things held in for far too long. "My father was a good man, but weak. He let the world crush him. I learned early on that people who feel too much lose. That getting attached makes you a prisoner." He took a deep breath. "I promised myself I'd never be like him." She walked toward him slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "You built that armor thinking it would protect you, but it's also trapped you inside." "I became what the world needed me to be, Olivia. A general, a leader, a man who never fails, who doesn't love, who needs no one." He looked into her eyes. "And then you showed up." Her heart tightened. "You do feel, Liam. You might not know how to name it, but it's there." He looked away, wrestling with words he'd never learned how to say. "When I'm near you, I lose focus. My mind fills with images, with possibilities, and that makes me weak." "No," Olivia was firm. "It makes you human." "I don't know how to love." The confession came out raw, painful. "All I know is how to protect, control, calculate. Emotions don't fit in the equation. They'd break me. She stepped closer until there were only inches between them. Then let yourself break. He looked at her, eyes filled with fear and longing. What if I can't put myself back together? Then I'll help. You. Her voice was a whisper, but a steady one. A breath strong enough to rebuild any ruins. They stood there, eyes locked, for long seconds. Liam hovered on the edge, between retreat and surrender, between closing off forever or letting go. And when Olivia lifted her hand and touched his face with her warm palm, he closed his eyes. Such a small gesture, and yet it felt like an earthquake inside him. You're already loving me, Liam. You just don't recognize the name yet. He opened his eyes slowly. How do you know? She smiled softly. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be opening up. You wouldn't be fighting yourself just so you don't lose me. He swallowed hard. There was so much truth in the room, it made the air feel heavy. I don't want to hurt you. Then stop running. That hurts more than anything you could ever say. And in that moment, something shifted. There was no kiss. No embrace, but there was acceptance. Liam took a step back as if needing space to breathe. You're right, he murmured. But you'll need patience. I don't know how to be easy, Olivia. I never have. I didn't come for easy. I came for real. He looked at her deeply, as if for the first time he didn't see a threat, but a home. And before leaving, he said, I can't promise I'll be everything you deserve, but I'm starting to want to try. When the door closed behind him, Olivia sat on the bed, heart both light and heavy at once. She hadn't won the war, but she had won a battle, and that was the beginning of everything. The days that followed Liam's confession were no longer silent. They were full of loaded pauses, lingering glances, and an intimacy that wasn't physical. It was emotional. It was as if the mansion had finally awakened, and now every room seemed to breathe along with them. Liam, however, was still wrestling with his nature. A man used to giving orders, maintaining control, leading with certainty, now found himself speechless before a woman who no longer accepted just words. Olivia, on the other hand, wasn't willing to survive on emotional crumbs. She had heard his pain. She had witnessed his vulnerability, but she didn't want more excuses. She wanted action. She wanted to know if he would truly choose her, not just as the woman who disarmed him, but as the woman he wanted to walk beside. It was on a chilly autumn morning that everything shifted. She was in the mansion's greenhouse, tending to the flowers that were beginning to resist the cold. Her hands were covered in soil, her hair loosely tied back, and perhaps that's exactly why Liam watched her from a distance, feeling something in his chest he couldn't name, but it burned. Are you spying on me? She asked without turning, a soft smile on her lips. I'm admiring you, he said, approaching slowly. I'm still not sure I know the difference. The difference is that admiration requires presence. Spying keeps you distant. Olivia wiped her hands and turned to face him. And you're still somewhere in between. He met her gaze, feeling the weight of the truth in every word she spoke. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough, Liam. She stepped closer, stopping just inches away. You kiss me like you're mine. But you still live like I'm your emotional prisoner. He sighed, hands in his pockets, the way he always stood when he felt exposed. What do you want me to do? She gave him a half smile. I don't want promises. I want actions. You want me? Then show me. Do something that isn't out of duty. Do it because you feel it, because you want to, because you finally understand that kisses aren't contracts and declarations aren't obligations. Liam didn't respond right away, but something in his eyes shifted, as if the missing key had finally turned. Later that same night, he came to her, no warning, no formality. He held a small box in his hands, inside it something simple, a gold medallion, old, worn at the edges. It belonged to my mentor, the only man who ever taught me anything about loyalty outside of war. He gave it to me before he died and said I should only pass it on to someone I truly trust. He held the box out. I'm giving it to you now, not because you asked, for a gesture. but because for the first time I feel like I can trust someone other than myself. Olivia took the medallion gently, her eyes glistening without shame. This is your first step, Liam, and it's a big one. He stepped closer. His fingers touched her face, firm yet tender. You are the only truth I know that doesn't fit into logic, and even if I still stumble, I'm learning to walk beside you. The kiss that followed wasn't needy or rushed. It was steady, deep, a kiss that said, I'm here. All of me. And Olivia answered with her body, with her heart, with the certainty that the man, the general, was finally beginning to fall. And from the ashes of that armor something was emerging, something she liked more than she ever expected. But even with the gesture, the kiss, and the medallion, deep down she knew a greater test was still coming, because love isn't measured. In words, it's measured in consistency, and she was ready to wait, but not forever. For Liam Blackwood, trust was a more dangerous territory than any battlefield. He had commanded troops under crossfire. He had made ruthless decisions in war zones. But opening his heart, that was ground he had never dared to step on. Until, now since the moment he gave Olivia the medallion, something had shifted between them. It was no longer about tension or teasing. It was about truth, about presence, about beginning to see each other beyond the masks. But Liam knew. One act of vulnerability wasn't enough. He had to go further. That's why that afternoon Olivia found him in the main hall with a notebook in his hands. He was sitting by the fireplace, the pages open on his lap, his eyes serious, but vulnerable. "What is that?" she asked, softly. "My confessions." He looked up at her, gaze steady. "I've never shown this to anyone." She walked over and sat beside him on the soft rug. The notebook had a leather cover, worn with time. Inside were names, dates, half-finished sketches, and words written in strong handwriting but marked by hesitation. "This feels personal," she whispered, running her fingers across the pages. "It is," he sighed. I used to write when I couldn't speak. I was always told that showing emotion was weakness, so I wrote instead. In here are my fears, my losses, my guilt, and you." Olivia looked at him surprised. "I'm in here. Since the first week, since I realized you weren't going to break, even when I tried to crush you." She turned back to the notebook and read a passage aloud. "She looks at me like she sees things I don't, and maybe she does, because when I'm near her, I don't know where the general ends and the man begins." The words wrapped around her chest with quiet tenderness. It was as if Liam finally was completely unarmed. "You wrote this the night I almost sent you away." He looked down. But something stopped me. Something inside me that, for the first time, asked not to lose someone. She closed the notebook and placed her hand gently over his. "This is your greatest proof of love." He took a deep breath, like someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "But I still want to go further," Olivia raised, her eyebrows curious. Liam stood, reached into the inner pocket of his coat and returned to kneel before her. It wasn't a ring. It was the same medallion, but now, engraved with something new, their initials intertwined. "I want this to stay with you for good, not as a keepsake, but as a symbol of who you are to me now." He took her hand. "The only person I trust without hesitation." "Liam," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "I don't know what kind of man I'll be in the future, but I know who I'm becoming beside you, and if you still want to walk with me, I want this medallion to be the first of many promises." She didn't reply with words. She didn't need to. She simply embraced him, tightly, as if saying yes with her body, with her soul. And there, in that room, once filled with control and distance, now lived a love that didn't need to be shouted, because it had been proven, felt, earned, day by day. But fate, with its quiet mysteries, still had something more in store, something Olivia didn't yet know. Inside her, two lives were already forming, and no matter how beautiful Liam's gesture had been, it was only the beginning. Night fell over the mansion with a different kind of silence, no longer heavy with distance or restraint. Now it was sacred, a silence full of meaning, of unspoken truths. Liam was in his office, but couldn't read. Olivia was in her room, but couldn't sleep. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting for a decision to be made, and it came. Without warning, Liam climbed the stairs. His steps were steady, but his heart was racing. He carried no medals, no orders, no demands. He carried only himself. For the first time, whole, no uniform, no shield. He knocked, but Olivia was already standing, as if she had felt it, as if she too knew that this moment needed to happen. She opened the door. They said nothing. Liam stepped inside and closed it quietly behind him. The room was softly lit. A gentle breeze made the curtains sway. Olivia's scent lingered in the air, light, sweet, unmistakable. She wore a pale silk nightgown, simple yet beautiful in its honesty. Nothing about her was meant to impress, and yet everything about her disarmed him. "I came because—" he began, but she stopped him. "You don't need to explain." Olivia stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Just come to me." And he did, with the steps of a man finally leaving all his wars behind, with the eyes of someone who no longer wanted to command, but to feel, to belong. When their lips met, there was no rush. The kiss came as a long whisper, a silent request for trust. Liam's hands moved along her back as if memorizing a map. Olivia guided him to the bed, slowly, wordlessly, with the tenderness of someone who wasn't conquering a man, but welcoming a soul. He lay beside her, their faces close, their eyes locked. "This," he whispered, "this isn't just desire, Olivia. It's peace, it's surrender." She smiled, tracing his face gently with her fingertips. "Then kiss me slowly, like you've waited your whole life for this night." And he did. He kissed her like a prayer, like a thank you, like an apology for every wall he had ever built. Their clothes fell away piece by piece, not rushed, like old layers being shed. Every touch was a silent vow, every breath a quiet promise. There was no tension, only tenderness, a meeting of two hearts that had learned to trust in the dark. Liam looked at her like she was the most real thing he had ever seen. Olivia, eyes closed, smiled softly, sensing that this moment was where everything inside her finally aligned with the world outside. They came together with care. And time stood still, their bodies fit as if they'd always belonged. There was no urgency, no pressure, only surrender. Afterward, they stayed close. He rested his face against her neck. She traced slow circles on his back with her fingers. The silence around them was no longer uncertain. It was filled with clarity. "Are you afraid?" she asked, breaking the quiet. "No." His answer came without hesitation. "For the first time, no." She closed her eyes, smiling. "Then you finally understand." "Understand what?" "That love isn't weakness." He pulled her closer. "It's strength, the greatest kind." And there, in the warm darkness of that room, something else happened. Unseen, mysterious. Inside her, two lives had begun. But Olivia didn't know yet. She only felt it, that something greater than desire had taken root that night. Something quiet and powerful was beginning to grow. She fell asleep in his arms, light as a promise. And Liam, even without fully understanding what was happening, knew one thing for certain. That woman had changed his destiny, and now there was no turning back. That morning the world felt suspended. The sky was clear, the garden smelled of blooming flowers, and for the first time in a long time, Liam Blackwood woke up with a peace that didn't come from victory, but from surrender. Olivia was still asleep, her hair scattered across the pillow, her face calm, arms stretched out as if she belonged in that space all along. He watched her for a while, in silence. He felt the light weight of something he couldn't quite name, but now he knew he wanted to keep it, not out of control, not out of duty, but because at last he understood. He loved that woman. He got up quietly. And before the day was over, he already knew what he was going to do. For weeks, Liam had been writing in secret, An old habit, brought back to life by Olivia's presence. But this time, he wasn't writing to hide. He was writing to be seen. In a dark-covered notebook, he had recorded every change, every confessed fear, every moment he felt himself transforming because of her. He had written letters he never sent, confessions he never voiced, and on that day, he gathered it all into a single message: the proposal to begin again. That night, Olivia found a note on her bed. "Come, the general wants to be silent, and the man needs to speak." When she entered the library, she saw Liam standing by the fireplace. He held the notebook to his chest. His eyes were softer now, his expression less guarded. In that moment, he had left all his armor behind. "You told me words weren't enough," he began, voice low but steady. "But even so, I had to write them." He held out the notebook, and she took it with both hands. Olivia opened it. She read 1, then 2 pages, and when she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. "You wrote all of this. I wrote it for you, even before I knew I would." She closed the notebook, her heart racing. "Liam," but he was already kneeling. Yes, him, the general. The man who once commanded with a single look, who never bowed to anyone. Now he was on his knees, eyes fixed on hers, heart exposed like never before. The first marriage was a debt, a contract, a mistake. He took a breath. "But now I know. I know you're the only woman who's seen me from the inside out. Who didn't run when she saw me broken? Who taught me how to love without demanding perfection?" Olivia brought her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "I want to marry you, Olivia, but this time and for love. No duties, no expectations. Just because I can't imagine life without you anymore." She knelt in front of him, the two of them face to face on the floor. "I said I didn't want promises, remember?" she whispered, smiling. He nodded, a little anxious. "I remember. But this one..." She touched his face. "I accept." The kiss that followed wasn't explosive. It was soft, peaceful, full of the calm only those who've survived countless wars know how to treasure. They stayed there, kneeling, embraced, as if that quiet moment sealed a new beginning. There were no witnesses, no audience, but the love between them was so real it could have filled entire halls, and when they stood, fingers intertwined, Olivia whispered, "Good thing you don't know how to love." "Why's that?" "Because if you did, maybe you'd never have loved me like this." Liam smiled, a rare smile, one only she had ever seen. But fate, as always, had one more surprise. Because that same night, as Olivia got ready for bed, something shifted inside. A sudden wave of nausea, a shiver, an intuition. She didn't know what it was yet, but something was growing inside her, and soon the love they now shared would take form, and 2 hearts alone would no longer be enough for everything yet to come. The castle in the French countryside looked like something out of an old dream. Surrounded by quiet gardens and mist that danced over the lake at dawn, it was the place Liam had chosen for a new beginning. There were no military protocols, no contracts, no obligations, only a stone altar draped in white flowers and the soft sound of a piano drifting through the crisp spring air. Olivia walked slowly among the guests, her wedding dress light as the air she breathed. There was nothing left of the woman who, months earlier, had stepped into a different ceremony with tense shoulders and fear in her eyes. Now, her eyes sparkled with a rare peace, the peace of someone who had been chosen for love. Liam waited. For her at the altar, his face clean-shaven, his uniform replaced by an elegant grey suit. But what stood out the most was his gaze, steady, present, just vulnerable enough. Guests whispered in awe at the transformation, but no one dared to interrupt the moment. When Olivia reached the altar and their hands met, a sacred silence fell. This wasn't just a wedding. It was mutual surrender, a new beginning. The officiant, an old trusted friend of Liam's, spoke with a voice thick with emotion. "Today we don't just celebrate a marriage. We celebrate a miracle. The miracle of 2 worlds that once seemed incompatible and yet chose each other, challenged each other, healed, and decided to walk forward together. Liam held Olivia's hand tightly. His eyes never left hers. "You taught me that love is not weakness," he said, breaking from the script, his voice steady. "It's the only force strong enough to transform me without destroying who I am." She smiled, eyes filled with tears. "And you taught me," she replied, "that even the most closed-off hearts can bloom, if someone's brave enough to water them. Even when everything inside feels dry." The kiss at the end of their vows wasn't rushed. It was long, tender, and filled with gratitude. And the applause that echoed across the castle gardens wasn't polite. It was joyful. Everyone present knew they were witnessing something rare. Two souls choosing each other after seeing every broken part. At the reception, string lights hung between trees lit the dance floor. Soft music filled the air as Liam and Olivia danced beneath the open sky. No speeches about power, no praise for achievements, only smiles, light touches, quiet kisses, as if they were the only two people in the world. And then came the surprise. During dinner, while guests toasted and laughter floated through the room, Olivia stood and asked for everyone's attention. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. Liam looked at her curiously, holding her hand beneath the table. "I told you this wedding marked the beginning of a new chapter," she began, her voice steady, despite the tremble in her breath. "But destiny," she smiled, "decided to give us something more." She turned to Liam, her eyes tender. "My love, you're going to be a father." Time stopped. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then Liam took a breath, the kind of breath people take when trying to believe what they've just heard. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, and then he dropped to his knees, just like he had during the proposal, but this time, no words, just hands, covering his face, his chest rising and falling, overwhelmed, completely undone. Olivia knelt in front of him, cradling his face in both hands. "You gave me more than protection. You gave me love. And now, you've given me a family." He pulled her into a tight embrace, a long one. With tears, he didn't hide, because now vulnerability had become his greatest strength. Around them, the guests applauded, cried, laughed. But in that moment, there was only the two of them. That night, the general died, and in his place, a new man was born, a husband and a father. The months following the wedding were quietly revolutionary in Liam Blackwood's life. He used to wake up at 5 a.m. for solitary workouts and military meetings. Now, he woke to Olivia's sweet voice calling his name, with messy hair and her hand on her belly, as if sharing the responsibility to protect something sacred growing there. And protect he did, no longer with weapons, but with presence, with tenderness, with a care that even amazed those who had known him for decades. The mansion underwent a transformation. Heavy curtains gave way to light fabrics. Walls that once held war portraits now displayed family photos, ultrasound drawings, flowers Olivia liked to scatter around. Even the hallways seemed wider, as if the house breathed relieved with this new life. Liam started walking barefoot at home. He laughed, sometimes too loudly. He messed up pancake recipes at breakfast just to make Olivia smile. He grew fond of shared silences, slow walks, and the stories she told about her past, her insecurities, her dreams. And in return, he began to share too. He told her about the guilt he carried for past decisions. He spoke of the fear of becoming the man who destroyed his own family. He shared the relief he felt in discovering that, even after everything, it was still possible to love and be loved without needing to deserve it. Olivia listened with tenderness, without judgment. "You don't have to be perfect, Liam," she said, her eyes on his. "You just have to be whole." And he was. No longer torn between the general and the man, now everything in him was part of the same truth, that he had found his redemption, and she wore cotton dresses, carried new life in her belly, and had the power to disarm him with a smile. The day of birth was a mix of chaos and miracle. Her water broke during a calm afternoon in the garden. Olivia smiled, more serene than expected. "I think it's time," she said. Liam stood still for a second, then he activated instincts he didn't know existed. He ran, organized, called the medical team, and within 2 hours they were on their way to the family's private hospital in Paris. In the delivery room, he didn't leave her side for a second. He held her hand tightly. He sweated, cried, and for the first time felt fear again. But it was a different fear, a fear of losing what was most precious. And then the cry came. A sharp, strong sound that seemed to announce the beginning of a new era. "It's a girl," the doctor said with an emotional smile. "And a boy." Liam caught his breath. "Two?" "Twins, Mr. Blackwood," she confirmed. "Perfect," Olivia cried. Liam hugged her, and when he held the two small ones for the first time, one in each arm, something inside him finally felt complete. It was no longer redemption, it was rebirth. The following week they registered the names. Edward, in homage to the mentor who had given him the medallion, and Alice, the name Olivia had loved since childhood. The mansion was now filled with voices. Baby cries, mother's laughter, father's hurried steps. It was everything Liam had never dreamed of, because he had never allowed himself to dream. But now it was everything he needed. And on a tranquil afternoon, as he put the two children to sleep, Olivia approached him in the hallway, rested her head on his shoulder, and said, "You're no longer the soulless general." He smiled softly. "And what am I now?" "My home. Theirs. And finally, your own home too." Liam didn't reply. He just hugged her tightly, understanding what it meant to be whole, as someone who, at last, found peace. And there, among cribs, smiles, and the soft light of dusk, the man who had won wars, realized his greatest victory was learning to love, without uniform, without shield, by choice and forever. The love that seemed impossible, cold and distant, has proven to be the most powerful force capable of transforming even the most closed-off heart. Liam and Olivia not only challenged the norms of a forced marriage, but rewrote the meaning of what it is to love, with courage, dedication, and authenticity. Now I ask you, have you allowed yourself to love like this? Or do you still carry your own invisible chains that prevent you from opening up to what your heart truly desires? Do you believe that a man who has never known love can truly change, and that love can emerge from pain, struggle, and even obligation? Share your thoughts in the comments, so I'm eager to know where you're listening to this story from and what it has stirred within you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos that will stir your emotions. Like and share with someone special. Spread this message of hope and transformation. Remember, love can change everything. You just have to let it in.